felt there was a great deal of contempt for the constraints on government that our Constitution lays out. And I also felt that there was a contempt for the Constitution, and I only absorbed this sense of contempt by association with some of these senior appointed civilians.
Who are all neoconservatives, who all believe in dominance, who believe in preemption, who believe in the military option as the first resort rather than the last resort.
They have had a very fixed, indeed almost obsessive idea that in fact Iraq is a major actor in the world and a probable threat, possibly a deadly threat to the United States.
This is a group of people who have essentially believed that might makes right, that the United States at this stage of history has unchallengeable power and therefore a responsibility to use it to make the world over in the manner that we, or they rather, think it ought to be made over.
I think behind the basic neoconservative philosophy is a considerable arrogance that American interests are the primary goal of all American foreign policy.
And they seem to have a really serious habit of not being interested in listening to what other people say about this subject.
Now, of course, American interests should matter, but there are enlightened and unenlightened elements of self-interest. And I think in this case, we have determined and defined our interests globally in almost total disregard of what other states want, what their concerns are, how they might or might not be able to contribute. We're on a roll, you're either with us or get out of the way. I find remarkably little interest in the character of other countries, the nature of their problems and difficulties. This is boring, I think, to neoconservatives who really see this as quite irrelevant. What other people, what the political culture of other societies are, what they want, what their people might want, what some of their concerns might be. It's really quite irrelevant because we know what we're going to do and get out of the way if you don't agree.
They said, look, the neocons, we brought down the evil empire of the Soviet Union, and now we're going to bring down Arab nationalism as personified by Saddam Hussein and Bashar al-Assad, and once that happens, you're going to have democracy. You know, the problem is those people have not set foot. If they've been to the Middle East, it's been to Tel Aviv only.
No, I don't think it's an accident at all that so much of the justification turned out to be fallacious, misleading, deliberately so.
They thought they had a place in history. They were going to bring down, obviously, a very dysfunctional Arab peninsula, as well as Iran, and they were going to change history. They believed they won the Cold War. And they said, all right, we won the Cold War because we were tough with the Soviet Union. We get tough with these people, and they're going to become like us.
It is fair to say that the Iraq War was a diversion from the war on terrorism. It certainly meant that people weren't paying as much attention to Afghanistan as they should have, and the resources that might have gone to Afghanistan ended up being focused more in Iraq.
If you attack another country with no justification, people are going to say, wait a minute, this isn't a war on terrorism, this is a war on this is imperialism, this is colonialism, you know. And this is why it's a distraction, because you need the help of these people. If you get this view that the CIA and the FBI are lurking around the bazaars and the souks of the Middle East and handcuffing people or assassinating, that's not the way the world works. You've got to have the help of the locals to identify these people and either put them in jail or remove them from positions where they can do harm.
In January of 2002, as I was sitting in the bunker of the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan, and I and several colleagues were sitting around the one little working TV, and lo and behold, here came the infamous statement of the axis of evil, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. And we all looked at ourselves and went, oh my God, here we are kind of in ground zero of Afghanistan, and Washington's talking in very belligerent terms about these other three countries, and we don't have Afghanistan anywhere close to being settled.
The only person Saddam was a threat to at this point, as we saw when the army collapsed, was to Iraq. He didn't have weapons of mass destruction. He wasn't scaring anybody. He certainly wasn't scaring the Iranians or the Turks or the Saudis or anybody else. It was a state that was on the verge of failure. Now, it is a failed state. Failed states cause terrorism. You know, you can name them. Afghanistan, Lebanon, Somalia. Anytime you create a vacuum, it's where people flock to, discontented, to fight wars.
Osama bin Laden had been saying for years, America wants to invade an Arab country and occupy it, an oil-rich Arab country. He'd been saying this. This was part of his propaganda. So what did we do after 9/11? We invade an oil-rich and occupy an oil-rich Arab country, which was doing nothing to threaten us.
The only real connection is that having invaded Iraq, we are very likely to make it a focus of terrorism. We are likely to produce what the president has said Iraq represents, namely the central battlefield in the war on terrorism. Why? Because we've sent a lot of Americans into a place where they're sitting ducks for people who think the only good American is a dead one.